A golden heart behind iron bars. 5 years. That's how long he waited, behind steel doors, accused of a murder he didn't commit. But he wasn't alone. In a quiet corner of Montana, a loyal golden retriever named Bailey kept the memory alive. Every sunrise, every knock at the door, he waited. Until one day Bailey smelled something no one else did. And everything changed. A forgotten jacket, a silent witness, and a final wish before the needle. What this dog uncovered will make you question everything you thought you knew about loyalty and justice. Before we begin, let me know. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments, and if you love emotional stories about heroic dogs and second chances, hit that subscribe button so you never miss one. Now, take a deep breath, because today's story will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. The autumn air in Crescent Hollow had turned to ice overnight, biting and sharp, as if the wind itself carried judgment. In this forgotten corner of Montana, dawn broke not with color, but with the ghost of light-washed-out gray through clouds that hung low like old regrets. Frost etched every porch step, and a still silence rested over the pine-lined streets. Inside Stonebridge Correctional Facility, the cold was worse. Not the kind you could escape with gloves or a thick coat, but the sterile, humming chill of concrete walls and metal bars. Cole Bennett, former sheriff of Crescent Hollow, sat alone in his cell on the last Monday of October. The cot beneath him creaked as he leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his rough hands clasped tight. At 58, Cole looked every bit the man who had once stood tall in a khaki uniform, trusted and obeyed by a town that now barely spoke his name. His once dark hair was now a salt and pepper mess cropped close, and deep crow's feet fanned out from eyes the color of weathered steel eyes that had stared down tragedy, liars, and now death itself. The lines on his face had deepened these past 5 years, carved by silence more than time. He'd been convicted of killing Raymond Cross, a real estate mogul who had poured money and secrets into Crescent Hollow's development boom. The trial had been swift. A fingerprint on the weapon, a suspicious bank deposit, an old rivalry turned sour. Motive, means, no alibi. The jury didn't take long, but Cole never confessed. He never wept. And he never begged. Until last week. That was when he submitted his final request. To see Bailey. The dog had been more than a canine partner. He had been Cole's only companion after Cole's wife died of cancer and his daughter moved away. A golden retriever with golden eyes and the calm temperament of an old soul. Trained to track, detect narcotics, and perform crowd control. Bailey had been the kind of dog who looked at you like he understood things you hadn't said out loud. Cole hadn't seen him in nearly 5 years. Footsteps echoed outside the cell. 3 sets measured official. Then came the jangle of keys, the click of the lock, and the door opened with a reluctant groan. Warden Judith Myers stepped in first. She was in her early 60s, tall and spare, her gray hair pulled tightly into a bun beneath her regulation cap. Her voice, when she spoke, was firm but not unkind. "Bennett," she said, "your request has been reviewed and approved." Cole didn't move at first. The words hung in the air like a breath he hadn't dared hope to take. "You'll have 15 minutes, she added, her face unreadable. "Tomorrow morning, 7:30. He lifted his head. He's still alive?" The voice that came out of him was smaller than he expected, like it had been buried beneath too many layers of restraint. Warden Myers nodded. "He's been in the care of your niece." A slow, almost disbelieving breath escaped his lungs. Then he nodded. Once. "Thank you." Myers hesitated, an unusual moment of pause for a woman known for her precision. "He waited by the gate, I'm told, every day." Then she turned and left, the guards falling in behind her, the door shutting with a finality that felt different this time. 15 miles outside of Crescent Hollow, the Bennett family farm sat wrapped in early frost, its weathered barn flanked by fields of brittle grass and broken fence lines. The old house leaned slightly from age, but smoke curled up from the chimney, stubborn and steady. Emily Bennett, 17 and sharp-eyed, stepped onto the porch with a steaming mug clutched in her hands. Her long auburn hair was pulled back into a loose braid, and her oversized denim jacket belonged to her grandfather, another ghost in the long line of Bennetts. She had the kind of posture that looked like defiance, but was really just how she protected the soft part of herself she didn't let many see. Her boots thudded softly against the porch wood as she looked out toward the gate at the end of the gravel drive. Bailey was already there. He lay in his usual spot just beyond the fence, his large body curled in a golden crescent. His face, once youthful and vibrant, now bore the silvering of age gray along the muzzle, cloudier in one eye. His ears perked slightly when he saw her, but he didn't get up. He rarely did anymore. Emily walked slowly toward him, crouched beside him, and set the mug down in the dirt. "You know he's not coming back, right?" she whispered. Her voice cracked, and she blinked hard. "They said tomorrow." Bailey lifted his head and nudged it gently against her thigh, a low rumble escaping his chest, part sigh, part comfort. "I hate them for what they did," she said, curling her fingers into his thick ruff. "But I think you hate it worse, because you still wait." She had never believed her uncle killed that man. Not the one who taught her how to shoot tin cans, or the one who told her ghosts weren't real but still checked under her bed until she was 10. No, the man they described in court wasn't Cole Bennett, and Bailey, with his silent, patient vigil, seemed to know it too. From the porch, the sound of tires on gravel reached them. A gray state-issued sedan pulled into the drive, and a short, stocky man stepped out. His badge gleamed on his chest. "Kent Dorsey," he said, nodding at Emily. "Animal transport. I'm here for the dog." Emily stood, her arms instinctively lowering in front of Bailey. "He's old," she said. "He doesn't travel well." Kent offered her a sympathetic glance. "We'll go slow. He'll be back by noon, I promise." Emily knelt beside Bailey again, whispering into his ear, "Be good, okay? You're all he's got left." She pressed her forehead to his for a long moment. Then, with trembling fingers, she clipped on his leash. Bailey didn't resist. As Kent led him to the vehicle, Emily watched from the frost-covered drive. She didn't wave, she didn't cry. But inside, something old and aching stirred, something that whispered this wasn't over yet. Back in Stonebridge, Cole sat on his cot again, facing the window. He could almost picture Bailey now waiting at the gate, nose lifted to the wind. The one creature who had never stopped believing him. Tomorrow. One last time. He closed his eyes and breathed. The prison's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as 7:30 approached. The air inside Stonebridge Correctional felt heavier than usual, as if the building itself anticipated the reunion it was about to host. Warden Judith Myers stood outside the visitation chamber, clipboard in hand, flanked by Officer Damon Keller, a young correctional officer built like a linebacker with an earnest face and a military buzz cut. Keller had joined the facility only 6 months prior. Though new to the job, his quiet demeanor and respect for order had already made him dependable in Myers' eyes. Yet even he seemed uncharacteristically tense this morning, fidgeting slightly with his key ring. "Are we really doing this?" he asked under his breath. "It was the governor's office that approved it," Myers replied flatly. "We're observers, not judges. Now, open the gate." Down the corridor, the sound of claws on tile echoed toward them. Bailey moved slowly, but with clear purpose, his thick golden fur slightly dulled with age, but his posture alert. His gait was uneven, his right hind leg favored slightly due to early arthritis, but his head remained high, ears forward, and tail twitching with cautious anticipation. His leash was held by Kent Dorsey, the same transport officer from the day before, his barrel chest rising and falling with the effort of matching Bailey's steady pace. Trailing close behind was Emily, her green jacket zipped up to the collar despite the warmth of the hallway. Her face was pale, and she hugged herself with her arms as she walked, her eyes never leaving Bailey. Waiting just outside the glass wall of the visitation room, a woman leaned forward with a small video camera in hand, already recording. She was slight, no taller than 5'4", with tightly curled brown hair tucked into a knit cap and a brown leather satchel slung across her chest. Mia Sanders, 26, was a field reporter for a regional online news site called Heartland Truths, known for its emotional, human interest segments. She had covered stories of reunited soldiers and therapy dogs in children's hospitals, but nothing quite like this. She was sent here for what her editor called a feel-good dog piece before the execution, but already something about the tension in the air, the stiffness in Emily's body, and the old dog's haunting alertness told her there might be more, Inside the visitation room, Cole sat at the edge of a metal bench. He'd been given a fresh orange jumpsuit that smelled faintly of starch, and his hands rested flat on his knees. His breathing was slow, but each breath felt like dragging rust across stone. He heard them coming before he saw them, the leash dragging, the uneven click of nails. Then the sound stopped. The door opened. Bailey hesitated only a second in the threshold. His eyes swept the room, and then he saw him. His body stiffened, head tilted slightly. Then he let out a sound that was not quite a bark, not quite a cry, something deeper, more primal. He surged forward, leash slipping from Kent's hand again as he launched across the room. "Whoa!" Keller instinctively stepped forward but was waved off by Myers. Bailey reached Cole with a thump and a whimper, his large frame practically collapsing into his former handler's chest. Cole dropped to the floor, arms around the dog, his shoulders shaking for the first time in years. "God, buddy." "Look at you," he whispered. "I missed you, boy." Bailey licked his chin, then pawed at his leg, whining, snuffling around his chest and arms, moving urgently as if to confirm every inch of him was real. Emily stood in the doorway, watching silently, arms wrapped around herself. Kent stepped back. Even Officer Keller, rigid a moment ago, swallowed thickly. Then something shifted. Bailey's head jerked downward. He sniffed sharply at Cole's left breast pocket, where a faded handkerchief poked out slightly. The dog froze. His entire body stiffened. Then he let out a sharp, urgent whine and began pawing at it, furious, insistent, almost panicked. Hey, what's this?" Cole said, confused, reaching into the pocket. Bailey growled not at him, but at the fabric as, if it offended his instincts. He pressed his nose into the cloth, whining again, licking it, then snapping his head up to look directly at Emily. "What is it, Bailey?" Emily stepped closer. Her voice wavered. "That's your old handkerchief, isn't it? From the farm?" Cole looked down at it, red plaid, soft from washing. "They let me keep it. Said it was too small to be contraband." Bailey resumed sniffing, now whining continuously. His tail dropped low, his ears pressed back. His anxiety filled the room. "He's trying to tell us something," Emily said softly. Warden Myers stepped forward, arms crossed. "What's in that handkerchief?" "Nothing," Cole said, holding it up. "It was just in the laundry bin when I got arrested. I grabbed it without thinking." Mia, from the viewing area, lifted her camera away from her face. Her expression had changed. She clicked the record off button and quietly pulled out a notepad. Something didn't feel right. A dog's reaction like that wasn't about sentiment. She had seen trained animals react to gun oil, accelerants, biological samples, but never to an old handkerchief. Kent scratched his beard, watching Bailey. "That's not just a dog missing his owner," he said under his breath. "That's a detection pattern." Warden Myers narrowed her eyes. "What was in that laundry basket, Bennett?" Cole looked blank. Nothing, just my jacket, pants, shirt, that." "Jacket?" Emily interrupted. "The leather one?" Cole nodded slowly. "Yeah, my old work jacket." Emily's face paled. "Bailey kept trying to take that jacket the night of the murder. I thought he was just being playful, but he wouldn't stop. He scratched at the closet all night." Cole's face tightened. "You never told me that." "I didn't think it mattered." Mia furiously scribbled notes in her pad. "Excuse me," she called through the glass. "Is that jacket still in evidence?" "No," Warden Myers replied without looking at her. "It was deemed irrelevant, donated, or destroyed." Bailey whined again, pawing at the handkerchief, his breathing short, eyes locked on Cole's. Inside the visitation chamber, something unspoken passed between man and dog. Not just grief, urgency. The room fell quiet. The hallway outside the visitation chamber remained still after the guards escorted Bailey and Emily out. Inside, Cole sat alone on the cold floor, the faded handkerchief crumpled in his hand, his fingers curled tightly around the fabric, as if trying to squeeze answers from it. His mind wasn't on the walls around him anymore. It was somewhere else, back at the house. The old laundry basket, the creak of floorboards at midnight, the jacket he'd worn the night Raymond Cross was killed. "I wore it that night," he muttered to himself, barely audible. "I wore the damn thing that night." Back in the facility's administration wing, Warden Myers stood with her arms crossed, watching Emily and Bailey as they waited to be escorted out. Bailey paced back and forth now, less urgently than before, but still sniffing and pausing near anything that carried residual scent. Emily stood rigidly by the wall, one hand tightly gripping the strap of her canvas bag. The brief reunion had stirred something deeper than grief in her. Mia Sanders lingered nearby, pretending to check her equipment, but her sharp eyes kept darting toward Bailey. The dog's reaction to the handkerchief wasn't just emotional. She had seen drug dogs react to contaminated surfaces, and therapy dogs freeze when detecting seizures before they happened. But this looked like a canine trying to piece something together from a memory stored in his nose, not his mind. Mia made a decision. She needed more. Outside the prison, the frost had melted into a crisp, dry morning. Emily sat in the back seat of the state-issued vehicle with Bailey resting beside her, his head on her lap, his breathing slower but ears still alert. Kent Dorsey, ever quiet and steady, drove them toward the outskirts of town. The ride was silent until Emily finally spoke, her voice tight with thought. "He tried to tell us something," she said, eyes fixed on the distant tree line. "Back then, too." Kent glanced at her in the mirror. "What do you mean?" "That jacket. Bailey kept pawing at it the night my uncle came home after the murder. I didn't think anything of it, but he wouldn't stop. I finally shoved it into a closet." "You still have it?" She shook her head. "No, the cops took it the next morning." Kent gave a low grunt. If there was anything on it, they'd have logged it. I don't trust their logs. As soon as they got back to the farm, Emily let Bailey out and walked directly into the house. She bypassed the kitchen, went upstairs to her late mother's old office, and pulled open a drawer that hadn't been touched in months. Inside was a cracked plastic hard drive labeled Cam Backup, Barn plus Gate. Her grandfather had installed cheap motion detecting cameras around the property after their barn was vandalized years ago. The footage was spotty and often useless, but she suddenly remembered. A few days after Cole was arrested, Bailey had gone missing for 2 hours, and when he returned, he was covered in dirt and twitchy. She carried the hard drive to the dining room, where her old laptop sat. The screen flickered, then lit up with the rough blue hue of outdated security software. She scrolled through the calendar, clicking through footage from the week after Cole's arrest. Dust particles floated in the camera's lens, animals scurried in and out of the barn, and occasionally a rabbit triggered the gate motion sensor. But then she found it, timestamp, 3:42 a.m. 3 days after the arrest. The footage was grainy, but clear enough to see Bailey running toward the far end of the property, his tail low, posture tense. A minute later, a figure emerged near the edge of the frame, male, medium build, wearing a hoodie and gloves. His face turned away from the camera. He followed Bailey, then crouched, appearing to dig or handle something near the base of the back fence before disappearing again into the woods. Emily leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. What the hell? She replayed the clip twice more, zooming in, trying to catch any insignia or detail on the man's clothes. Nothing, no logos, no reflections, no car visible on the nearby road. She called Mia. Mia answered on the second ring. "Emily, what's going on?" "I found something. A camera caught someone following Bailey 3 days after my uncle got arrested. He was digging. I don't know what he was doing, but it wasn't random." There was a pause. "Can you send me the file?" Emily hesitated. "Come here. I want you to see it yourself." Half an hour later, Mia pulled up in a dusty Subaru with a dented bumper and stepped out with her satchel. She wore a loose army green jacket and jeans tucked into worn boots. Despite her usual calm tone, she looked charged with purpose today. Bailey met her at the door, sniffed, then walked beside her into the house like they'd known each other longer than a day. Emily played the clip again, and Mia leaned in, her brow furrowed. "You see the way he moves? He's comfortable in that yard, not panicked. That's someone who's been here before. You think it's someone local? Maybe. Maybe someone tied to the case." Emily sat down slowly, her voice distant. Bailey found something out there, or someone was hiding something he already found. Mia stared at the screen. Either way, this isn't just a dog reacting to his owner's scent. He's remembering something. She stood, pacing. "I need to find out what happened to that jacket. If there was trace evidence and it was discarded without being tested, someone made that decision for a reason." Emily closed the laptop. If someone framed Cole, they used Bailey too. They counted on the fact that a dog couldn't speak for him. Bailey lay on the rug, eyes open, watching them both. His tail thumped once, as if in agreement. The following morning brought with it a cold, persistent drizzle. The clouds above Crescent Hollow hung thick and unmoving, draping the town in a weary gray that matched the mood in Emily's farmhouse kitchen. The only sound was the soft clink of a spoon against porcelain as Mia stirred instant coffee, leaning one elbow on the counter and scanning her notes from the day before. Her curly hair, still damp from the rain, was tucked under a baseball cap that read Heartland Truths, its brim shadowing her sharp eyes. Across from her sat Emily, bleary-eyed, nursing a chipped mug. Her braid was half undone, strands escaping to frame a face that looked far older than 17 this morning. Bailey lay at their feet, stretched out on the linoleum floor, his breathing slow but steady, one ear twitching each time either of them moved. "I think I know who we need," Mia finally said, her voice low but certain. "Frank Halverson." Emily looked up. "Who's that?" "Cole's former partner. He retired just before the Cross case. Old school investigator, but sharp. Real sharp. He never bought the story about Cole, but he couldn't say much after he left the force. You know him?" "Interviewed him once in a piece about rural police stress. He's a little guarded, but I think he'll talk to me." By noon, Mia had driven 2 hours west into the hills surrounding Bitter Creek, where Frank Halverson lived in a modest one-story cabin made of river rock and red cedar. The front porch sagged slightly under the weight of years, and a wind chime made from spent shell casings tinkled softly in the breeze. Mia parked, adjusted her jacket, and knocked 3 times. The door opened to reveal a tall man in his mid-60s, built like a tree trunk with broad shoulders and a neck like a fence post. His silver hair was buzzed close, his jaw square and unshaven. Deep creases etched his brow, and his dark brown eyes carried the cautious intelligence of someone who had learned not to trust the first version of any story. He wore an old sheriff's department hoodie and faded jeans tucked into hunting boots. "Mia Sanders," he said before she could speak. "You always show up unannounced?" "Only when it matters." He raised an eyebrow but stepped aside. "Come in. Leave your shoes," rain's tracking mud. Inside, the house was sparsely decorated, mostly framed photographs of mountains, a few plaques from law enforcement commendations, and a large painting of a canine German shepherd over the fireplace. The air smelled faintly of pine and coffee. "You want answers about Cole?" Frank said, motioning for her to sit. "I want to know what didn't make it into the report, because Bailey, the dog, he's reacting to things that shouldn't be there. And Emily found security footage from the farm that raises more questions." Frank sighed, settling into a recliner across from her. "I knew Cole 20 years. Never met a man more stubborn about doing things by the book. He made enemies because he wouldn't cut corners, not because he played dirty. When the Cross murder happened, I was already out. But I still read the files. Something always smelled off." "Like what?" "Like how fast it went to trial, like how some evidence just disappeared. There was one guy I flagged early on, Richard Lorne. He used to be Cross's business partner, managed the finances, knew every dirty deal Ray ever made. I've never seen his name in the summaries." "Exactly. It was in the raw notes from the first interviews, but his name vanished from the final reports. Said he was out of town during the murder. No follow-up, no alibi confirmation." Mia leaned forward. "Do you still have those notes?" Frank hesitated, then stood and crossed to a filing cabinet near the window. After a few minutes of rummaging, he pulled out a dusty folder marked Cross 2019, Early Leads. He handed it to her. Page 6, statement from a waitress at Dock and Dine. She saw Lorne arguing with Cross 2 nights before the murder, loud enough that other customers took notice. Mia scanned the page. Her pulse quickened. "That's motive." "Sure is. But nobody wanted a second suspect once Cole was in the net." Mia nodded slowly. "Can I take pictures of this?" "Already did," Frank said, tapping his phone. "I've been sitting on it too long. You do something with it." Back in Crescent Hollow, Emily was cleaning out an old supply room in the rear of the sheriff's station. The new sheriff, Russell Dean, a broad-shouldered man with a politician's smile and little field experience, had reluctantly allowed her access to anything labeled non-evidence after Mia's story began gaining traction. Russell was wary, but wanted to appear cooperative for PR reasons. Emily sifted through boxes of miscellaneous storage spare uniforms, confiscated signs from old protests, expired first aid kits. Bailey followed her with careful steps, tail swaying slightly as he sniffed each corner with deliberate interest. When Emily opened a cracked plastic container labeled Old Locker Contents, Bailey froze. His nose twitched. Then he stepped closer, leaned in, and let out a soft whine. Emily's heart skipped. She reached inside and pulled out a bundled fabric, an old sheriff's jacket, not Cole's. This one had a patch missing and faint stains on the cuff. Bailey sniffed the sleeve, then stepped back. He sneezed once, then again, as if repelled by a chemical. Emily noticed a faded mark near the elbow circular, faintly discolored. She lifted it to her nose. It smelled like ammonia and something sharper. A voice startled her. "That's luminol," said an older man walking in. Deputy Tom Reyes, nearing retirement, with thinning hair and kind eyes behind thick glasses. He was gentle, soft-spoken, known around town for remembering every child's birthday. "What?" "The stain. That's how we test for blood. Someone tried to clean that jacket with it." Emily stared. "Was this tested?" Reyes frowned. "Not that I know of. That bin hasn't been opened in years." Bailey let out a low growl. The afternoon light bled through the blinds of Frank Halverson's study, painting golden stripes across the room's worn furniture. Dust hovered lazily in the beams, disturbed only when Frank moved another box onto the table. He wore his old reading glasses, wire-framed and slightly crooked, a relic from his last few years on the force. His brow furrowed deeply as he pulled out a stack of CDRs and USB drives, labeled in his own tight scrawl. Mia sat across from him, her notepad already open, pen poised. She looked tense, jaw tight beneath her scarf, her recorder placed silently beside her coffee cup. "Some of these were backups from the old evidence archives before they switched systems," Frank muttered. "I copied them for my own sanity after retirement. I had a bad feeling about how some things were handled." He inserted a thumb drive into an old laptop that wheezed like it hadn't been used in years. After several minutes of slow booting and password entry, the screen flickered to life, revealing a series of files sorted by date. "Here." Frank clicked one labeled, "Cross-Property Back Gate. Audio, MP3. They listened. At first it was silence, then the static of outdoor wind, a low hum, distant barking, maybe a coyote. Then suddenly, a voice, sharp and distinct. "You think you can screw me and walk away, Ray, huh?" The voice was male, mid-range, and harsh with emotion. "You said we were done. I'm not done. Not until you bleed." Then static again. Nothing more. Mia's hand trembled as she stopped the recording. That's Richard Lorne's voice?" Frank nodded slowly. "I'd bet my pension on it. I spent 2 years listening to that Man Dodge Investigations. That's him." "This was never played in court?" "No. They didn't include this camera's audio file in the trial evidence, claimed it was corrupted." Mia stared at the screen. "But you saved it." Frank looked away, guilt flickering across his face. "I wasn't supposed to, but I couldn't let everything go dark. I thought maybe someday." She stood. That day is now. Across town, the Crescent Hollow Police Department sat unusually quiet. Emily was in the evidence archive again, reorganizing boxes under the pretense of assisting the overworked administrative clerk, Carol Jean Ann, older woman, with a thick southern accent, brightly painted fingernails, and a fondness for iced sweet tea. She had kind eyes and rarely asked questions as long as someone seemed like they knew what they were doing. Carol trusted Emily, partly because she was Cole's niece, but also because she brought Bailey with her each visit, and Carol loved dogs. Bailey was curled beside a file cabinet when suddenly his head jerked up. His ears pricked. He rose, nose twitching furiously, and moved toward a shelf marked "Cold Weapons Non-Tested." Emily followed cautiously. The dog paused at a clear evidence bag sealed with thick red tape. Inside was a single black leather glove, left hand, the palm slightly worn. Bailey leaned forward to sniff, then recoiled violently. He let out a sharp yelp, then started to whimper, backing up with his tail between his legs. His body trembled. Carol peeked around the corner. "Everything all right?" Emily nodded quickly, though her voice was thin. "Yeah, he just must have smelled something strong." Bailey stared at the glove, frozen, as if it held a memory too strong to face. Emily reached out and carefully turned the bag to read its faded label. Found near back gate of victim's property. Unconfirmed relevance. She recognized the handwriting. It was Sheriff Dean's. That glove had never been tested. And Bailey's reaction? It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Back at the farmhouse, Mia returned just after dusk. Her cheeks were flushed from the wind, and her breath fogged the air as she stepped into the kitchen. Frank had come with her, carrying a box of copied files, his face set with quiet resolve. Emily greeted them with the evidence bag. This glove, Bailey reacted like he did to the jacket, maybe worse. Frank studied it. Left-handed, medium size, no testing note in the log. Mia opened her laptop and played the audio again. Emily's hand went to her mouth. That's the voice I heard once, at the diner. He was yelling on the phone in the booth behind me. I didn't know it was important. Richard Lorne, Mia said quietly. The man they never brought in. Frank exhaled, rubbing his temples. Between this glove, the audio, and the stain on the other jacket, there's enough to force a review. But we need to go public, fast. Bailey let out a soft growl, his gaze still locked on the glove, as if even through the plastic it haunted him. The dawn that broke over Crescent Hollow Prison was a pale, trembling thing. Mist clung to the hills like ghosts that hadn't yet decided whether to rise or retreat, and the frost on the ground hadn't melted even as the sun climbed past the tree line. Inside the prison walls, everything was still save for the ticking of the large brass clock above the warden's office. It marked time like a drumbeat toward the inevitable. Cole Bennett sat on the edge of his cot, fully dressed in his standard-issue Navy uniform. His hands, calloused and scarred from a lifetime of labor and law, rested lightly on his knees. His eyes, though weary, no longer carried the defeated fog they had just a few days ago. Something had shifted. He wasn't a man who believed easily in miracles, but the look in Bailey's eyes that day, the way his old partner reacted to that glove, had stirred something long-buried hope. Outside, the prison yard remained off limits, but one small concession had been made. Bailey had been allowed temporary clearance to stay on prison grounds under supervision. Frank had pulled every favor he had left, and the warden, though, reluctant, recognized that this wasn't just about a dog anymore. In the administrative break room, Emily sat cross-legged on a cracked vinyl couch, laptop open, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Her hair was pulled up in a messy bun, her eyes sharp and locked onto a document she was rewriting for the third time, an emergency appeal petition. She was 17, but no one in that room dared treat her like a child now. Across from her stood Sheriff Russell Dean. He was in his mid-40s, stocky, with a kind but perpetually tired face, short-cropped blonde hair, and a cautious demeanor. He had inherited the badge after Cole's arrest and never fully believed the version of events presented in court. Now, standing at the edge of a possible miscarriage of justice, he finally stepped up. "We need the governor to read this today," Dean said, his southern drawl more pronounced when stressed. "And I need more than just words. Do you have anything new?" As if on cue, the door creaked open and Mia entered, Bailey padding quietly beside her. The dog had been acting agitated all morning. At first, they thought it was the stress of being back near Cole again, but Bailey's nose had led him to a different discovery. "I think we do," Mia said, pulling an old backpack from her shoulder. "We searched Cole's property again last night, top to bottom. Bailey kept returning to this, Cole's old field pack. The bag was weathered and sun-faded, with years of dust embedded into the fabric. Mia set it down and began peeling back the inside lining. Her fingers stopped on a lump sewn into the seam. I felt something metallic. We thought it was just the support rod, but..." She tugged gently, then held it out for them to see. A small, round piece of gold, nearly invisible except for the tiny crown emblem. "A Rolex clasp," Dean said, stunned. "That's the part that locks the bracelet shut." Emily looked up. "Wasn't the victim's Rolex missing?" Mia nodded. "Raymond Cross was known for flaunting that watch. It was never recovered. The prosecution said Cole must have taken it and discarded it." "But Cole says he never touched it," Emily added. This was tucked away, sewn into the lining. It could have been planted." Russell Dean's face hardened. "And if it was, that's intentional framing. And it proves Cross had that watch on him when he died," Mia said, "which means whoever took it was there when the murder happened." Bailey sat beside the pack now, pawing gently at the spot where the clasp had been hidden. "It still smells like blood," Mia said. Bailey froze when I pulled it out. Dean turned, already pulling his phone from his belt. "We need to call the governor, now." While Dean arranged the emergency meeting, Mia and Emily prepared the evidence board in a secured conference room inside the sheriff's office. They pinned up photos, the glove, the jacket with the luminol stain, the Rolex clasp, and printouts of the security footage showing Richard Lorne at the property after Cole's arrest. At precisely 3:30 p.m., a secure video call was initiated with the governor of Montana, Evelyn Brookhart. She was a woman in her early 60s, with sharp cheekbones and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her silver hair was clipped in a tight bun, and her steel gray suit was impeccably pressed. Known for her fairness and her tough stance on wrongful convictions, she leaned in as soon as the video connected. "Governor Brookhart," Sheriff Dean said, voice steady but urgent. "We're requesting an emergency 48-hour stay on the execution of former Sheriff Cole Bennett." "You understand how serious that is," she replied, her tone flat but inquisitive. "I'll need cause. We have new physical evidence." A Rolex clasp connected to the victim was recovered from a hidden seam in Cole's gear, something that would have gone unnoticed in normal searches. It was likely planted. "We also have a glove with canine reaction indicating connection to the real killer." Mia leaned forward. "Governor, I've also recovered a deleted audio file from a security cam that recorded Richard Lorne threatening the victim days before the murder. That man was never called to testify, never even pursued." Bailey, who had been silent until then, barked sharply. Everyone paused. He turned toward the pinned-up image of the glove and sat down beside it, unmoving, a subtle, powerful testimony in itself. The governor exhaled slowly. "Send everything you have right now. If what you're saying holds up, I'll issue the stay personally." Within an hour, an official notice came through. 48 hours. Cole's life was no longer ticking down by the minute. A cold wind swept across the Montana plains as Crescent Hollow prepared for a storm. Gray clouds churned above the courthouse like a reckoning long overdue. Inside, the atmosphere was even heavier. Sheriff Dean stood before a packed room: journalists, legal observers, town residents who had once believed the worst about Cole Bennett. He adjusted the microphone with steady hands, though his jaw was tight. "To the people of Crescent Hollow and the state of Montana," he began, "we have reopened the investigation into the murder of Raymond Cross. And what we've found is not just alarming, it's damning." Mia stood in the corner of the room, camera in hand, filming every word. Emily sat near the back, next to Bailey, who lay calmly at her feet, his golden fur rising and falling with each breath. The old retriever seemed more tired than usual, but his eyes followed Dean's every movement. Frank Halverson approached the front, holding a stack of newly unsealed documents. His voice was low and gravelly, but there was steel behind it. "We've uncovered a pattern of manipulation surrounding the case file. Phone records, financial data, and internal memos all point to one man, Richard Lorne." He pulled up a digital slide on the screen behind him, a bank ledger, showing a series of large deposits made to an anonymous account. A second slide showed the same account linked to District Attorney Howard Ellsworth. Ellsworth, a once-respected man in his early 50s with carefully combed silver hair and expensive glasses, was not present. The media had already reported he had quietly taken a leave of absence the night before. "Richard Lorne funneled bribe money through shell accounts," Frank continued. "In exchange, Ellsworth buried the evidence that could have cleared Cole: the audio file, the missing Rolex clasp, the conflicting timelines, all erased, altered, or omitted." A hushed murmur ran through the room. "But that's not all," Mia said, stepping forward. "Richard Lorne was not only seen near the crime scene after the arrest, he also accessed Cole's locker. Surveillance footage from the sheriff's department shows him entering evidence storage the morning after the murder, unauthorized. That's when the Rolex clasp likely got planted." Gasps followed, but none louder than the one when Emily raised her voice. "And Bailey," she said, "recognized Richard's scent on the glove, on the backpack. He's been reacting consistently, even violently, to anything connected to Lorne." The judge presiding over the emergency appeal, a tall, stoic man named Justice Harold Klein, was in his late 60s with a grizzled beard and an expression like stone carved by decades of legal fatigue. He rose slowly. "This court recognizes the new evidence as substantial and credible. As of this moment, the conviction against Cole Bennett is overturned. The room erupted into gasps, then applause. Emily turned and hugged Mia, tears running down her cheeks. Bailey lifted his head and let out a single bark, sharp, proud, and filled with something that sounded like relief. Meanwhile, several counties away, Richard Lorne was placed under arrest. The man, once impeccably dressed and ever smiling, looked hollow in his mugshot. His thinning blonde hair was uncombed, his tailored jacket stained with sweat. For the first time in years, justice pointed in the right direction. Later that evening, back at the Crescent Hollow Veterinary Clinic, the light in the exam room glowed soft and sterile. Dr. Karen Wilcox, a petite woman in her early 40s with chestnut hair tucked into a low ponytail, spoke gently as she examined Bailey. "He's been moving slower, right?" she asked, looking at Emily. Emily nodded. "Yeah, the past couple of weeks. We thought it was just age." "He's nearly 12, the vet confirmed, "but it's more than that. I found a mass near his spleen during the scan." Mia's breath caught. "It's an early-stage carcinoma. The good news? It hasn't spread. And with treatment, there's a real shot." Bailey was lying on the table, eyes half-lidded, breathing calm. Emily rested a hand on his paw. "What do we do?" Dr. Wilcox smiled. "We start tomorrow. He's still got fight left in him. And now, he has a story worth fighting for." Outside the clinic, the storm broke. Rain poured in steady sheets, cleansing the town like a long-awaited baptism. Cole Bennett, now free, stood beneath the overhang and looked up into the night sky. The first clean breath of freedom filled his lungs. Bailey, his partner in both battle and redemption, would have another shot just like he did. The morning sun bathed Crescent Hollow in warm gold, the kind of light that slipped between every crack and touched even the coldest corners. After weeks of storms and courtroom shadows, the town square was alive with something rare hope. The courthouse steps were draped in flags, simple floral arrangements lined the railings, and folding chairs had been set out in tidy rows. A modest podium stood at the center, where Sheriff Dean now stood, his uniform pressed and polished, though the worry lines around his eyes remained deep. He cleared his throat, looking out at the small crowd that had gathered, neighbors, colleagues, reporters, and strangers who had only heard the name Cole Bennett whispered in controversy. Now they came to witness something different, the homecoming of a man the system tried to bury. Cole emerged from the building flanked by 2 guards, not as a prisoner this time, but a man finally free. He was dressed in civilian clothes again, jeans and a button-down shirt Emily had brought him. His frame was leaner than it once had been, weathered from prison walls and sleepless nights, but he walked with quiet dignity, spine straight, gaze calm. And then a sound broke the stillness, a bark low, raspy, but filled with unmistakable joy. Bailey. The old golden retriever bounded forward from where he'd been waiting with Emily, his gait slower than years past, his hind legs trembling slightly with each step, but he ran anyway. His tail whipped back and forth like a flag of triumph. The crowd fell silent as the dog reached Cole and leapt, front paws pressing against the man's chest. Cole dropped to his knees with a soft, choked laugh, burying his face in Bailey's golden neck. "You waited," he whispered. "You old fool. You really waited." Bailey let out a groan of a bark and nuzzled his muzzle into Cole's collar. There was something almost sacred in that moment, a reunion built not on time or justice, but unbroken love. Emily, standing nearby, wiped her tears with the sleeve of her blazer. She had straightened her posture, dressed with intention today. A navy skirt suit, a small pendant of her late mother hanging at her neck, and a pin on her lapel that once belonged to Cole. Sheriff Dean stepped forward and raised his voice for the crowd. "Today, we're not just welcoming Sheriff Cole Bennett back home. We are also recognizing someone whose actions, though silent, spoke louder than any testimony." He turned to Bailey. "This dog, this partner, carried the truth on his nose and in his heart for 5 years. Today, by the authority of this department and with the unanimous support of our county board, we recognize Bailey as an honorary investigator of Crescent Hollow." A cheer rose from the crowd, mixed with laughter and sniffles. Carol Jean, the evidence clerk, let out a loud "Amen" from the second row. Bailey tilted his head as Dean gently lowered a small medal on a red ribbon over his neck. It rested just above his graying chest fur. Mia Sanders, camera still in hand, captured every second, but her mind was already on the manuscript. She had received an offer that morning from Silver Paws Publishing, a niche press that specialized in non-fiction animal tales. Her title was clear from the start: Bailey, the dog who never gave up. After the ceremony, she approached Cole and Emily. "I know you don't like attention," she said to Cole with a warm smile, "but people need to hear this, about Bailey, about you, about truth that fights back." Cole nodded. "Tell it true, that's all I ask." Bailey, now curled near Emily's feet, let out a tired sigh. The crowd had begun to disperse, and soft music played over the town square speakers. Children ran with balloons, and older residents lingered in the sunshine. Crescent Hollow, for once, felt healed. Emily crouched beside Bailey, running her fingers through the rough fur near his ears. "I got my acceptance letter," she whispered. "University of Montana, pre-law." Bailey opened one eye, then closed it again. "I want to help people like Uncle Cole, and maybe make sure dogs like you get the credit they deserve." Cole walked over and sat beside them both. He placed a hand on Bailey's back. "You saved me, old boy," he said. "Now it's our turn to give you every day you deserve." As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the square, Bailey slept. His breathing was slow, steady. The tumor was there, but so was the treatment. And now, so was the love, unquestioned, unstoppable, unconditional. They had all crossed the darkness, and now, together, they had come home. We don't choose where our story begins, but we can choose who walks with us to the end. For Cole Bennett, it was a loyal golden heart named Bailey who waited through silence, through years, through doubt. He wasn't just a dog, he was memory, he was hope, he was truth wrapped in fur and love. In reuniting with Cole, Bailey didn't just help free a man, he reminded a whole town of what it means to believe. Sometimes, it's not the grand speeches or courtrooms that change the world. It's the quiet loyalty of one soul refusing to forget. In our lives, we all have something we're waiting for, something worth holding on to. And maybe, just maybe, we all deserve a Bailey, someone who doesn't give up on us. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to believe again. Leave a comment below and tell us, who would you wait a lifetime for? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more stories about courage, second chances, and the kind of love that never fades. May God bless you, and may you always find light in the ones who never let go.